Are you looking for more out of your life? Do you need ideas on how to start new businesses and how to move forward in your own personal life? Well, guess what? You have come to the right radio show. At You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, you will learn and hear from many people from all walks of life who are sharing their challenges, their stories, the habits, and the mind shifts they had to overcome to become who they are today. On top, you will get a chance to connect and see how you can overcome anything by networking and learning about your next move through this radio show. I present to you our great speakers at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show with your host, Cesar Espino. Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. It is your host, Cesar Espino, and you can find me at www.cesarrespino.com. And today I have a special guest. Her name is Pauline Crawford. Hey, Pauline, how are you?
I'm absolutely wonderful today, Cesar. Good to meet you.
Yes, definitely. Likewise. Before we dive in, I want to be able to give our listeners and viewers a little bit of your background, and then we can definitely get into some of the other stuff in your story. So, Pauline, she's known as an ambassador of magical conversations. Dr. Pauline Crawford is an author, international speaker, gender dynamics expert, magical conversations host, a CEO of the Corporate Heart International with a mission to develop leaders who co-lead a blended masculine and feminine inclusive style. She works with executive CEO leaders facing crisis today. From crisis management to future growth, she uses value creation to seed from people-centered, heart-minded workplace cultures. Her work experience comes from hands-on interactive conversational programs across the UK, Europe, Asia Pacific, and US organizations across all sectors from tech companies to banking, construction to hospitality. People matter in all situations. If you value the difference with Q360 degree gender dynamics map, you can navigate any difficult relationship and build a sustainable business cultures where men and women co-lead their people to magical results for all shareholders, stakeholders, and customers. I love it. Man, that's amazing. That is amazing. So definitely, I can see you're doing so many different things and you have a lot going on for yourself. Except I want to step back a little bit, right? And I want to go back to the beginnings. Like, where are you originally from and what was your growing for you?
Well, I come from London,
okay,
England, UK. And although I live in America, I still have a very strong British accent because I've only been here a short time. And my upbringing was very wonderfully loving, and I was very, very fortunate. I had an amazing, lovely family. We were very together, two brothers and a sister and me, and parents very loving. And I think I was very blessed to have a very conversational upbringing. I loved the chatter. We had lots of British tea parties with lots of aunts and uncles and things like that. So that's where I come from. And I never imagined that I would be living in America. Or I would never imagine I would have been traveling around the world. So this is
it's amazing.
You can overcome anything. I realize that in my life now.
Yeah. So, and talking about, never imagined yourself being outside of London or your home country in the States per se. Definitely that's something that a lot of times I believe as people are growing up in their younger years, they have a dream and they have this vision of where they want to be. So did it ever cross your mind of having that vision of leaving your home country to be someplace else?
Well, yes and no. What was really fascinating, Cesar, is that when I was a little girl, unlike many little girls who dreamed about ballet shoes and things like that, I dreamed about being a sailor on the tall ships. And I was very struck by the, in England, in London, there's a tall ship called the Cutty Sark, and we used to go and visit it. And I used to dream of being up on the sails and going away across the sea to America, of all places.
Yeah.
And so fascinating. And then I did actually start sailing when I was 11, which was quite curious because we lived in London, which was nowhere near the sea, but we went on holiday to the seaside. And I think I always had this adventurous spirit. I always fancied being an adventurer, although I hadn't really worked out how I was going to do that. And I had a very, dare I say, normal first half of my life. I married my university boyfriend. We were married we were together 30 years, married 24 years, and we had 2 amazing kids.
Yeah.
But then my life changed, and that's where the adventure became, because I realized that I wanted more. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I wanted to do different things. So although I didn't really think about leaving to live in another country, I was very open. I was open to business. I was traveling all over England and Europe doing business. And then I went and met my now American husband in Europe, in Budapest. So it all happened not by accident. I don't believe anything happens by accident. I think it's all kind of meant to be somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, and by the way, I mean, I've been to Budapest a couple of times, and so that's definitely a nice city to meet somebody for sure. So
yes.
That's amazing. No, that's good. So let me ask you this: like, even coming, I'm sure it's kind of like the same school system, like here in the States is high school. I'm sure it's the same thing over there. Coming out of that and going into like college, did you had any idea of what industry you wanted to go into, or like what to study?
Well, what was interesting was that I majored in maths at school, but curiously, I'm not really a mathematician. I'm an applied mathematician. I love building things. And so I went to university to do sociology and statistics, which, to be honest, I didn't really enjoy, but I loved being at university. And then I decided that I was going to be a fashion designer. So I was very clear, and it took me about a year to realize that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
So I just went with the flow, and the flow has been really a part of my life. I just started working. I actually worked in the tourism business, and I just loved it because it was about the people. Everything was about the people. And to be honest, I never had the intention to do what I'm doing until I was in my 40s. So I could be a bit of a late developer, but what I think happened for me is that everything that came up in front of me, I just went, oh, should I try that? Oh yeah, let's try that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because I think I was born an entrepreneur. I had always that spirit of wanting to do something, but I wasn't sure what it was. And then I discovered that when I actually became an image consultant in my 40s. And I thought, I'm interested in this because I'm interested in people. So it wasn't really about image. It was about, how do people work? Why is she different to her? And why is he different to him? And that's where I developed my passion for conversation and also for understanding different types of men and women, which is a core part of my work now. So I've always just gone with the flow.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I like 2 things that you mentioned, and I think that the people that are watching us or even listening to us, they can, maybe relate to this in some sort of aspect. And really, the message that I kind of see from what you just mentioned is, not kind of giving up and just continue to move forward. As you said, you kind of you're going through the flow, right?
Yes.
And one thing you talked about, you said you were very open to business. You were very open to life in general. You were very open to just whatever was coming to your way. And you were just really allowing that to come through. And if this didn't work out, okay, then something else came through and you did that, didn't work out. And it seems like you went from one to another. A lot of people might say that with the first or second time that they try something, they might end up just saying, you know what, this is not for me. Let me go back to something, quote unquote, more secure or whatever the case may be. And I think that when you want to pursue that entrepreneurship, it's not about a straight line. You're going to have a lot of ups and downs. And my mentor talks about, throw enough noodles into the wall and see what sticks. And then when you find that one thing that sticks, then continue. And that's what you did. You were throwing all these noodles and like, no, that's not sticking. And finally something hit, right?
Yeah.
So what is your opinion on that?
Well, I think I've learned this. I learn every day. Every day is something new. And especially today when we're faced with all these things. But one of the things I really learned, and I talk a lot to my clients about, is what is your natural gift? And what I say is it's what you were born with and has nothing to do with your education. It even doesn't have to do with your parents. It's actually what you were born with. Now, if you're lucky and you've come into an environment which really encourages you to be natural, then you will actually excel quicker. But, you know, when I look at I was definitely naturally tuned into chattering, speaking, conversation, but also about how do things work? You know, why does that fit with that? And that was part of my, you know, I did love maths when I was at school, and I was hopeless at language. But we've created a world which says you've got to learn all the things that you don't do well. I think we need to learn what we do well and do more of that. And so I always encourage people to go back to what was original. You know, were you originally really good at detail? Were you really good at music? Were you really good at words? Were you really good at smells and became a cook? You know, I mean, you can actually track it officially and unofficially right back to what you were born with. And in that way, I think we're not all born to be entrepreneurs, but I think we're all born with something very good and very natural. And people often say to me, well, I don't know what it is. And I say, well, what do you do? And when you do it, people say to you, oh, gosh, you're so good at that. And you say, oh, no. And you dismiss it because actually it's so natural to you. You don't think it's a skill, but actually it's your best skill.
I love that. And I was actually going to ask you, like, in terms of that, like, people might say, well, how can I find that? Very similar to when people say, you know, find your passion, find your why, find your purpose, and say, people might say, well, I don't even know how to start or how to begin with that. And I like that because you're right. A lot of times, you know, people will compliment you. People will tell you, you're so good at this. And you're trying to dismiss it, like, nah, not really. I'm good. I mean, that's the answer right there. I think I didn't see it from that perspective. In terms of any major obstacles that you might have come across your life, can you name maybe one or two that you know you ended up you know stumbling against, and how you overcame that obstacle?
Well, I think the main one in my life was when I realized that my 30-year relationship with my first husband was not going to be what was going to go ahead. And it was, you know, I adored family life, and I was very conscious of my values about family and harmony. And yet I knew that we weren't right. There were lots of things we were distancing. We maybe had known each other too long. We were growing out of each other. We met when I was 18, he was 19, and now we're in our 40s. And it's like, I never imagined that I would change that. I mean, I was born in a Catholic family when, you know, you don't divorce and many pressures, but I just knew that it wasn't right. And I divorced in the best harmony I could do. I remained friends with him until sadly he died a few years ago, but he had some issues with alcohol and things that we won't go into. But I think sometimes it's important to recognize where your boundaries are and what you won't put up with. And that's, for me, is what we're facing now in the world is I study a lot about women empowerment, but I'm very keen that men understand women and women understand men, because I think we're stacking up obstacles that we don't need to have there. But that was a major one for me, was sharing that with my kids, who were teenagers, with my family. And what I was amazed at, and I write in my book about don't make assumptions, I remember telling my mother, and she just said, if you're that unhappy, then it's right to part. And she was a convert Catholic, and I thought that was amazing to me.
Yeah, right.
And she supported me throughout my life until she passed at 93. She was amazing.
Wow.
And I think when you're genuine, the lesson I learned was don't be afraid to be genuine. Even if you think I'm going to hurt other people. Obviously, people were affected and upset, but it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. No, and I can see that. I forget what was the actual saying. Les Brown talks about, are you growing together or are you dying together, right? And a lot of times I can see that it's very difficult to come out of especially a 30-year relationship, or let alone any kind of relationship, but except when you have that much of a lifespan with somebody, it's not easy to come out of that and be able to a lot of people say, well, I'm already old, or I cannot reinvent myself, or I cannot start all over again. And right, exactly. And you can do that. It might be a little bit dark, and like Jim Rohn talks about this. He says, after dark, light follows, right? After night, day follows. So there's always going to be that. How long that's going to be, that's the unknown path to everybody's question, except it'll come to that, right? And that's where we got to be able to find ourselves and not get lost in that darkness or in that moment of anxiety or stress or any of that stuff. We got to be able to find things throughout that can help us build our persona and ourselves, right? And I'm sure that you can relate to some of that, being able to go through something like that, whether even if he wasn't right for you, it's not easy to just let that go, for sure.
It's not. And I think it's very important to keep the conversation going, but not be put down by anybody, not be just as I talk a lot about valuing differences. We're so different. All of us are different to each other. Unless we share and have magical conversations without judgment, we can't get to understand differences. And we have different reasons for doing things. And I think that's the way we've got to converse in the world much more clearly.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about your book. When you wrote the book, what were some of the reasons why you wrote it? And then what is the main message you were trying to come across with the book?
Well, the main message is that we can have, I call them magical conversations. And it's very important to recognize that it's very much about no judgment, no anger, and no coercion. Those are my three main pillars in the book. But it's about, you've got to know yourself and you've got to know what you want to share, but you also need to allow understanding of other people. And I think I did have a lot of that naturally. When I went through my divorce breakup, I learned that I did want to be out there in the world, helping other people to have these conversations. And my daughter actually gave me the title. She said, "Oh, you're so good at magical conversations." So I thought, well, let me maximize on that. And what it is excuse me, it's very important to understand that it's a flow of energy. It's not pie in the sky. It's actually very creative space that you can develop where you come with your experience. So any conversation can be magical. This is magical, but you can also have designed magical conversation experiences, which I work with my clients, where you say, as you sit in this circle, you are not allowed to judge anybody. If you decide to judge somebody, we'll request that you leave. Mm-hmm. Now, it's a very simple rule. And people say, but, I say, you may be internally having some judgments, but don't have them in the space that you're in. Yeah. So you can say, well, in my experience of this topic, I blah, 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 blah. But you don't stamp the table and say, I think this and this is the way, because it blocks and it doesn't allow for this magic to flow. And the reason I call it magical is out of these conversations comes all sorts of things that you hadn't imagined, because people feel that they can say how they feel, how their experiences matter. And they feel that they do matter. And we need that right now. We need a lot of magical conversations to get over, what's happening in our world. So it came from my own experience. And the book is very, very much about what I call value creation. So only you can create your own value, and only you can give that value to somebody else, and only you can contribute that value to the community. So you need to know yourself, know your natural gifts, understand yourself. So the book goes into that, and it also tells my story of how, when I met my husband now in Budapest, we had a magical conversation. And in that magical conversation, we forged what did become a love story and an adventure, which has brought me to America.
Yeah, I love that. A Budapest conference, fell in love over 45,000 words of emails. And from that magical conversation, you had this wonderful relationship now, which is again amazing. And again, I think one of the biggest things that we can do as people is really communicate, right? And that's something sometimes we tend to forget on that, how we can communicate, whether it's with our significant other, whether it's with people, even with the madness that's going on right now, is,
Yes.
The actions do not speak, they don't speak the point you're trying to make across. It's actually giving a different point, a different impression, right? And so when we take the communication and I love how you put it, that magic conversation, we can definitely open up more things, right? A lot of times is like in business, right?
Yes.
A lot of people are afraid to ask or have that conversation because they're gonna get the rejection or the no or something to that extent that is not gonna favor them, and so therefore they don't ask, and then they never know. Except if you don't ask or you don't have that conversation, you may not even get it, right?
But also we need to use our imagination a lot more and our common sense. And I think some of the principles that I was talking about recently was emotional common sense. I said, I'm not sure everybody's got that, but we need to realize that we're in a place now where the world can be very different, and it can go the dark way and it can go the light way. And I believe that we have to stand, a bit like my lighthouse in the picture, is we've got to stand for the message of hope and harmony and friendship. And we have got some difficult issues to deal with, but if we do them without judgment, and with passion but not anger, and not to control anybody before they feel they're part of what's going on. So it's very, 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 it's so important now in business and in life. Right. And dare I say in politics, but we won't get political.
yeah, definitely not. So let's talk about what you do now and your clients and how you help your clients, or what is your business composed of. I want to see and learn more about that.
Okay. Well, Corporate Heart International is a growth from my original company in the UK. So Corporate Heart Limited, which is my UK company, was set up in '99, but now I'm spreading it because I've lived 4 years in Malaysia. I worked with amazing communities there. And my goal here now is to really work, as I am doing, with executive CEOs who are probably in medium-sized companies. I mean, I would love to shift some of the major corporates, but they are in probably a greater panic than the smaller ones. Yeah. But the medium-sized company that really sees that crisis management is the current fix, but the long-term fix is going to be the culture of inclusiveness, the culture of engagement. And that's what Corporate Heart International is about. It's about, I call myself CEO, which is a Chief Engagement Officer. Wow. It's all about engagement. You may lead your company through this crisis, but do you know how to engage your people so they are staying with you, they're engaged, they're enthusiastic, they're healthy, they're safe, and they're all having a conversation which says, we don't know exactly what's going to happen next week, but we are all in this together. So CHI, which is Corporate Heart International, is like chi. Chi is flow. So I'm actually, one of my little passions is I want to teach everybody to dance, because I think if we all dance, we would have a lot more understanding about each and every one of us. Yeah. But it is about doing things differently. I said recently on places, I think if we changed all the corporate boardrooms from a square or oblong table to a round table, we would be in the right place.
Yeah, no, definitely. And talking about dancing and going back to like the magical conversation, when we think about how we communicate with whether it's at a corporate level, talking to your employees, or even just outside of that with your friends, family, in anything, in everything, the foundation of communicating is obviously conversations, which is words, dancing, which will be your physiology in this case, right? Or how you perceive that. And then your tonality, like how do you speak to that person, yes. Right? And so when we can take the three different elements and be able to combine them as part of our conversations, then our message is a lot more powerful. The other thing too is that sometimes we as people forget that although out of those three elements, words are only 7% of the total communication. A lot of people misconstrue that and they say, well, if it's only 7%, it's not that critical. And on the contrary, it's a lot more critical. And we got to be able to use the right type of words when we're speaking to other people and or to ourselves, right? And so what is your experience when it comes down to like even dealing with some of your clients and how they speak to their employees or how they communicate? What is that message? Is it sending a positive or a negative type of connotation message?
Well, one of the issues is there's different energies, and what I've studied is the different energies between men and women, but also the different energies within us. So the masculine and feminine energy in all of us, but it varies. So it's graded into, I've designed a 360-degree map, so everybody's on the map. Some people, say for instance, a man who's got a strong masculine energy, he's not so into flowing conversation. He tends to be very focused on task. He's a bullet point man. So we need to understand how to embrace him into a tactical conversation maybe. And then you've got a more intuitive, feminine-minded man like yourself, I think, where you listen, you care, but you're still looking at things from a male point of view. And then in our females, there's our strong masculine energy, which I have because of my mathematics and my desire to design and put things together. But I'm female, all female, nurturing, relationship building. And some women are extremely feminine female. They're very nurturing. They're more sovereign. And as we all come into the world of business and we bring life to business, which is what is happening now, and we've now got lockdown, so we are experiencing extreme interweave between life and business. I believe we need this emotional integrity, understanding that we're all different and we all come to conversation differently. So I help my clients to understand different types of men and women. And if you've got a very traditional CEO, male or female, who's still in that very straight line, this is all about profit, cost, not about people, that's old school. We have to move so everybody understands that people are important. And I think that shift had started just before the pandemic started. And I believe that, especially now with the issues as we've seen across America, CEOs are coming up and saying, no, people are important, human beings first. Everything is about the human being. What I believe we need to do is to learn a lot more so that we can fulfill the desire we have to have people-centered, heart-centered business. I don't think that people don't want it. I think sometimes traditionally men maybe more so than women, but traditionally we haven't known how to do it. We've always seen business as that way, money, focus, profit. Now we've got to learn a whole new set of rules and regulations and change the whole system, but we will still create business, but we'll create life with it. And I think that is, there's a gap in our awareness and our knowledge that I dream to fulfill so that we can have companies ahead that will just do this automatically. It will be, as they say, a no-brainer.
Yeah, definitely. Let me ask you something. What are some of the advices that you've given, some of your clients when it comes down to really focusing on that magical conversation, or some of the suggestions you've given?
Well, one of the key things is creating the space. I mean, I think when we're rushing forward and we've only got KPIs and actions and all this stuff, is more difficult. So you have to make time for it. So what we do is we say, right, it's got to be scheduled in, and it's got to be in a time zone that everybody does come in and follow the rules. Because until you do that, you don't build up that energy. Now, it takes a bit of time, and I've had lots of times where people come into the circle and go, oh, this is a waste of time. But once they sit into it, and then they start appreciating it, and then they watch what is happening, and they go, oh, actually, we wouldn't have come up with that idea, or we wouldn't have come up with this bonding, we wouldn't have come up with this energy if we hadn't stopped and done that. And maybe that's what the pandemic is asking us, is to stop and pause and redo things. So it's a matter of changing habits. And so what I suggest to people is you do it on a very structured way. You maybe do the first one for just an hour and a half. You make it structured. You have 3 questions maybe that are, are talked about. You don't just say, oh, open it up and it's random. It's actually scheduled. So I would work with a client, say it's about inclusiveness or team building, then we would have 2 or 3 questions that create those conversations within the hour and a half. And it helps them to get into the methodology, but also share their content. And you can actually collect the data quite easily without attribution. And people are very proud of the fact that they explored so much. And it's amazing how much you can do in an hour and a half when you're not under threat and you're not feeling stressed. So my clients report back that, oh, I didn't realize that would happen. So sometimes you have to build the trust and then get them to come into it. It's very good to get men involved because they still are driving business many times. And I remember one instance where the CEO came to one of these meetings and 15 men came with him. And the women who were organizing the meeting didn't believe that they would get so many men. But I said, it's because the CEO came and the men followed. But then they enjoyed the process and came out going, oh, I'm really glad that we came. But they might not have come willingly if the boss guy hadn't come in. So yeah. It's a matter of being strategic. But essentially, it is a space of creativity and safety. And I think that's what the clients really like when they get into it. They often have to understand what the bonus out of it is, and they come to that from the experience.
Yeah, got it. No, I love that. Definitely, I can see how that's powerful and being able to understand all of that. And again, it might be applicable to business, yet a lot of those principles can be taken to your own household, right? And,
and be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's about understanding the values. So the core values in the book are about value creation, getting to know yourself, but also this idea of no judgment, no anger, and no coercion. And in a way, they're very simple. But in the book, you'll find there's examples of companies that I've worked with, and what the client says. That's where you resonate with what the results are.
Yeah, no, definitely. And talking about values, you mentioned something, and you said your unique value starts with you. If you shine your natural confidence, others will feel the warm embrace of your rays. So we become more valuable together. This is the value creation, right? And so if you can elaborate more on that, because I definitely love that message.
Okay, and it really is a very simple message. There's almost, if you imagine, 3 arrows. The first arrow is me, you. That's the beginning of our value creation. We're born, we get to know ourselves. And yes, we put boundaries around ourselves, but freeing ourselves to be our genuine, authentic self means that the second arrow, which is you and me, i.e. relationships, everything that I have, I take into the relationships. If I'm in a bad mood, I'm going to not be in a good place. If I'm in a good mood, I can share who I am. So we become you and me, we become us. But the third arrow is we. So the we is the bigger community that we're sharing. It might be our family, it might be our business, it might be our community, it might be our country, it might be the world. So it's like, remember, me, you, we. So the only part of that cycle that I can actually influence is the me. We tend to sometimes believe that the bigger external world is the only thing that controls us. But the truth is, we always have a choice. We have a choice to be in loving intention, and we have a choice to be angry. We may have issues or whatever, but it's always still our choice. And whatever we do, we take that into relationships. So this value creation means that if we know ourselves, and then I know you and me, and we create the we community, that community gives me value, because then I'm proud to be part of that. So it does give me value, but it starts with me.
Got it.
In a way, it's like when you're on the aircraft and it's going down, you put the oxygen mask on yourself. We can only help each other if we understand our truth in here.
Yeah. No, and the other thing that just came to mind is there's this African proverb that says, if there's no enemy within, there's no enemy outside, right? So it comes down to like the inner self you were talking about, and it's all about you. And, you choose those emotions, whether they're good or bad or however you want to position them. Just as you choose those emotions, though, you can also change the dynamics of that instantly. And so, one thing that I actually did a video this morning, and I was just talking about, we have to focus on a couple of things, in my opinion. Number one, we have to focus on love. We have to focus on peace. We have to focus on one kind, the humankind, instead of bringing this anger or doing things that are really out of proportion. We got to really focus on that, because we have the ability to change that. And when we start doing things from a place of love and peace, everything else is going to unfold, right? And I think that's pretty awesome. So,
it is. And the thing is that it's about taking responsibility. And this is something my father taught me, my mum as well, but my father mainly said, always take responsibility in any situation. So if you fail your exam, you take responsibility. If you pass it, then say, yeah, I passed it. Take responsibility for a failed relationship. Take responsibility for a good relationship. And if you're joining something like a committee or a community, then be part of it and be proactive. Don't sit there and moan about people. Be responsible. And I think that's a key message that we need for today is, and don't stay in our locked boundaries, even though we're in lockdown. Let's free ourselves, because our heart is free and our spirit and our soul is free. And if we do everything with a loving intention, it will make a difference.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. Pauline, I have a couple more questions for you before I let you go. One of them is, if people wanted to connect with you, how can they connect with you, and where can they find you?
Well, they can find me on LinkedIn under Pauline Crawford, and on Facebook, Pauline Crawford-Omps, which is OMPS, which is my American husband's name.
Okay.
And also my website, they've got two. One is missmagicalconversations.com, and then Corporate Heart International, which is not launched yet, but it will be very soon. But they can find me at Pauline at Corporate Heart International, and that will find me. And to be honest, because you were out on social media, I'm on Instagram as well as Pauline Crawford-MC. But if you want me, you can find me.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's awesome. And then one thing that I appreciate about you is that you have this very positive mindset and very loving, positive mindset. So I want to know, do you do or have any habits? We were talking about habits earlier today. Do you have any habits that you do yourself on a day-to-day basis to keep you in this positive mindset?
Well, I do like to laugh and smile a lot, and I love to dance. So, or dance as it is in America. I like to dance, and so I put dance videos onto my computer, and I'll dance on my own.
Yeah.
My husband's a musician, so if he's playing music, but it's all about movement and taking my dog for a walk. But I think it's very important to take time out for yourself and make sure you interact with, as well as business, interact with people that you love and you care about. So I spend some time on the video calls to the UK, where my kids are, my grown-up kids and my grandkids. And that helps me, because I do feel a long way from them at the moment with the pandemic.
Right. No, that's awesome. And talking about smiling, you're part of also the Keep Smiling movement, right?
I am, and I love it, because smiling has always been a very important part of my life. When I was 17, I wrote in my diary, I don't understand why adults don't smile all the time, because it makes them look much better. So I'm just going to smile. And I mean, seriously, I wrote that. And about, I think when I shifted my life divorced my husband, I was getting into business, and I just decided one day, I'm going to write smiles at the bottom of all my emails. So even if I wrote to a client and I put best regards, I put smiles, Pauline. And it's something I've done now for over 20 years. And it was interesting, because people would remark on it and say, oh, I love the fact that you put smiles. It's a very simple thing. Smiling is the most simple thing we can do, but we have to do it genuinely. But it gains a response from anybody else. Even when they're unhappy, if you smile and you catch their eyes, and of course we've got the problem now with masks, but you're a smiley person, we get an instant reaction, and it's good. So I loved it. When I met Andrea and Ken and Barry, I thought, this is fantastic. And if I even have a vision, which I haven't started yet, to have the Smile Foundation, which would be an education where we use the letters, so sound, movement, imagination, laughter, and love, and energy. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun if we had an education that was based on those values? So as well as teaching maths and English and all the rest of it, the teachers would always go back to that acronym. How much value we would have out of all of our students, it would be fabulous. So I love the Keep Smiling movement, and my book is created. It's in an e-form, so if anybody wants the e-book, that is available too. And I
Awesome.
just think the whole movement, alongside many other movements I've come across, is the way we need to go forward. We've got to be humans first, we've got to be smiling, and we've got to change the systems to be inclusive and engaging.
Yeah, no, I love that. And again, it's very magical when you take the conversation and then you throw in a smile to it, right? That's very awesome. If any of our listeners that are listening to us or are watching us might be going through any kind of challenging stuff in their life right now, whatever that might be, what would be one advice that you can give them to overcome that challenge?
I think the major thing to do, and I know that we all are in extremely different places and very difficult places, is going back to the fact that you have a choice. You have a choice every moment to smile. And recently I had a note from somebody who's in a very difficult place in Africa, and he said, "Can you teach me how to smile?" And I said, "Well, I can give you some advice. You've got to look out on your day and think of something that's good. The tree, the sky, the earth, whatever you haven't got, don't think about that. What have you got? You've got your breath. Even if you're in pain, can you think about something that you can be grateful for?" And that's the whole focus, is starting with me, starting with that choice of being a human first and wanting to find something that's good. Even if it's the most tiniest thing, that's where to start. And don't judge yourself against everybody else. Look at where you are at and be present.
Yeah, and I'm going to elaborate on that. I love that. A lot of times we tend to measure ourselves with somebody else's performance, or we might say, "Hey, we started at the same time. That person's up here. I'm still kind of like down here." And that's one thing that I think we shouldn't do. We should never measure ourselves against anybody else or compare ourselves, because that becomes somewhat of a toxic conversation in our head. And then we end up, instead of moving forward, we're self-sabotaging ourselves, right? So I think that's something that definitely everybody has a different journey, and everybody's going to learn differently. We're all unique in some shape or form. And as we move forward, we're going to be able to get what we want. And just as long as we continue to push forward, and I always keep saying, keep marching forward, just keep doing that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I love what you said. Again, the simplest thing is like even looking out and just looking at something that brings joy, right? It can make that big of a difference.
Absolutely. When you think about the wonder of the universe, how do we hang in space? How do these trees grow? Whatever it is, look at the marvel of beauty of nature, because sadly, a lot of man-made things have taken us in the wrong place, but nature will survive. Nature is what is at the essence. And think about how you're attached to the earth. Just think about the magnificence of the universe and see yourself in that moment.
Yeah. And definitely, like you said, appreciate the now moment today, which is what really counts, as tomorrow's not promised, right? So, Pauline, again, thank you again so much. I really had a great time. Before I let you go, do you have anything else you want to share with us?
I just think to reinforce that, although we can each, and I do too, wake up in the morning and go, "Oh my God, is this really what the world is facing?" Almost know that dare I say, it is an exciting journey. The unknown is scary, but it's also exciting. And if we're in a crisis, the Chinese symbol for crisis is two symbols, and it's danger and opportunity. So yes, there is danger, but there is opportunity. So just seek to find a tiny, tiny little bit of opportunity, a smile, a gift, a kindness in your day, and that is the opportunity to be.
Yeah. Awesome. And that's a good way to definitely end this. And I really love that. So Pauline, thank you again for being here today. I really appreciate you sharing your story and your tips.
Thank you, Cesar. And it's been a very magical conversation. So, of course, I love it.
I love that. Thank you so much. And for the rest of you guys, please make sure that you check us out on your favorite podcast platform. Make sure you come here, comment, share this, subscribe to this podcast. And I will definitely be looking forward to seeing you at the next podcast show. Have a good day. Bye.
Hi, I'm Cesar Espino, real estate investor, business coach, and consultant, and author of the book, You Can Overcome Anything, Even When the World Says No. My number is 424-501-6046. In my book, I talk about making the necessary changes to shift your mind for prosperity and certainty. Pick up your copy at Amazon. I also love helping families with their real estate and can purchase your house fast and all cash. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. My number is 424-501-6046.
Thank you for having me today. I am so glad you've tuned into this podcast. You can find me at your favorite podcast platform where you can like, subscribe, comment, and share. And to learn more about myself, my services, you can find me at www.cesarrespino.com, or you can also find me at your social media. Thanks for joining me, and I am looking forward to having you at the next episode. And know you truly can overcome anything.